Ladies and gentlemen, the legend. He joins me now. Here's how much I like you. You're on a short list of men who I admire so much that I would most be crestfallen to find out they were a piece of shit. That's how much I like you.
Well, maybe we should just try and maintain some arm's length so you never find out.
What's the worst thing you've ever done? Tell me right now.
The worst thing I've ever done?
Anybody.
Oh, boy.
Didn't you punch an anti-masker in a diner the other day? Wasn't that you?
Oh, jeez. You know what? One of the worst things I've ever done was to watch that over and over again.
I watched it 800 times.
Yeah.
Why are we watch? Why is that? I don't think that's a good thing to do. I don't think that is good character to watch someone get punched, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot.
Do you know what I really appreciated about that guy? I mean, because I growing up in Worcester, there was like a culture of, and I was relatively small to like Worcester is just like, I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and there was a lot of like big guys, and there was a lot of like fighting, and that guy who punched that guy gets into a lot of fights because like there was no hesitation. There was no like squaring off with that dude. He just like sort of just got up from his table, walked beeline, bam, went over, looked over. And the amazing thing about that guy, and look, I don't advocate violence, although that guy was being a dick. And he shoved that old guy too, which was a problem because that's like, I'm the old guy in that scenario now. But the guy who punched him and decked that guy, the anti-masker, when he's walking back to the table, this is the part that it was like, he's walking back and he's not in any way like looking where that guy, he was not, he knew that he had he understood who that dude was. As soon as he was like over him going, "You want another piece of me?" No? Okay. And he turns around to his back to him and there was no concern. And that I found sort of impressive. So that's one of the worst things I've done is watch that 400 times.
My analysis of that is, and what you're saying, I don't know if you're saying you got in a lot of fights. I was the smallest kid in my high school, even when I was a senior, and I made friends with the big kids and I defended myself with my mouth. That's how I became a comedian, because somebody like put me down, I would put them down so much harder they wouldn't say it again, kind of thing. I suspect you had that. Yeah,
there was some of that dynamic. Yes, definitely.
Too, but there's a certain level of experience that you have to have that much confidence that dude had. You know, he's been in some he knew he landed that, and he also, as it sounds like you're saying, he knew the character of the guy. He was all talk. He pushes an old man, and then someone comes up to him who's his match, and boom.
Yep. So that was pretty bad. And then the first thing that comes to mind, you know, I did a show with Maron years ago.
Yeah.
Called Break Room Live. And Mark and I, old friends, during that time, Mark and I were a little bit at odds with each other. And it was sort of unspoken. He was being very difficult, and I was annoyed that he was being that difficult. And one of the cruelest things I ever did was, and you know, Mark, he is incredibly, at that time in particular, this is like 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Before he's had his success, and, you know, and he's still sort of neurotic and whatnot, but he was really angry. And he was angry. He was very jealous of other people. And one of the people he was always jealous of, or just sort of like in competition, was with Patton Oswalt. And I came into the office one day, and Maron and I would sit. My desk is here, his desk is there, and we're facing each other, right? Like probably I'm about as far from where the camera was. And so I come sit down, I flip open my laptop, and Brendan McDonald, who was our producer, is sitting over to the right. And I just sit back and I go, "Oh, Jesus, did you guys... So have you seen the ad for The Fan?" That was a movie that Patton was in. I'm like, Patton is going to be fucking huge. He's going to be huge. And I have to say, that movie looks good. It looked good. Patton's going to be huge. And Brendan knows exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I don't say anything else. And I'm just typing away. And like literally a full 4 or 5 minutes later, Maron just goes, fuck this shit. Where's our publicity? Why is nobody watching our show? Like he was just like the fad thing. And just like, I did it purposely to torture Mark. And that stands out as an adult. One of the worst things I've done, I think, because I did it so deliberately and methodically that I felt bad about that.
That is a mean thing to do. Brendan produced me for the first year I did radio. Is he not one of the smartest, funniest people you've ever met? Brendan McDonald?
Brendan is one of the smartest people I've ever met.
Yeah,
without a doubt. And we both interviewed so many people. That's what I was doing on when I started my show. I was like, I need to find a Brendan. And I ultimately hired a guy named Brendan who was actually really good. But Brendan McDonald's just, he was.
I just wanted to get you to say stuff about him. I'll clip it out and send it to him.
Yeah, no, he's very smart.
And so
I believe that.
How does your team describe you now? Are you easy to work with? I want to work with you. Like when I watch your show, I want to work with you and Emma. And I bet you like a lot of I think your show's changed a lot, especially with her, the dynamic with her. Obviously Michael Brooks, like there's no replacing a guy like that at all. You didn't try and you can't, but like Emma's a completely different entity. And what you guys are doing now just seems so, I don't know. It's a lot of times it's my safe space. I love what you're doing now. But do they like you? You get along with everybody?
Yeah, I think people like. I think people like working here. There's every now and then, I would say, and Bradley's in the office right now, so I will get a sense of but every now and then I'll throw a little fit. Yeah. But I won't throw it at anybody else. I will just like be in my own cone of fitness. Right? Is that right, Bradley? Yeah. And so I'll be like, God, and it's usually I'm mad at myself. Although I just, as of like almost today, over the past year, the Majority Report was licensed to the Peacock app. And about 6-7 months ago, we started a second show exclusively for the Peacock app that we were producing. I think it's certainly the only thing that MSNBC or those people had ever licensed before. And it was a complete license deal. Like there was no, I delivered to them, produced, they put graphics on it, but that was it. And it was the second show in particular was just a lot of work.
Yeah.
We do 2.5 to 3 hours a day, and then I would do another hour. And you got to prep for this stuff. It's not just, you're doing a book interview or, reported pieces, and that has all ended. The year was up, and there was, we had options, but it was like, it's just too much work. And so I think it's going to free up some stuff on the show. I know it's made me, I think visibly over the past 2 weeks, I've been less stressed.
That's awesome.
So I'm pretty psyched about that. And we got to figure out how to sort of make up some of that revenue, but, we'll deal with it. It was just too much work. It was just too much work.
Well, I'm psyched to hear that because I'm such a fan of what you're doing and what you guys are all doing. It's great. I love it. I learn so much all the time. I steal guest ideas.
Please, I steal guests all the time. From that's basically, I have a round, I just could do a circle, but Brendan is actually doing our booking from afar now. But yeah, thank you. For me, it's like, I just feel like every day I get to talk, almost every day I get to talk to like a professor, and I get like a survey, like a class. 1 hour is a long time to dominate a professor's time to ask any question you have about the work they've been doing for the past 3 years. And that's that's a pretty, like, I don't know. I feel like for me, it's just, I'm just taking one long learning annex class.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like that's the most I feel like an imposter. I emailed Eddie Glaude, Princeton professor, yesterday. I was like, hey, man, time to talk sometime next couple weeks or whatever. And he's like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, who am I? Who am I to ask this guy
Eddie's great
to give me time?
Yeah. I know it's nuts. It really is nuts to have access to people like that.
But you have, over like 1.5 million subscribers now on YouTube. The show is continuing to grow, to explode. And yet you did have a feud with someone with the Steven Crowder, who he put you down in a way by saying something like you only had 1 million or whatever, something like that. And that was one of the most interesting moments about that. I'm not sure if other people picked up on it, but it's like money. Once you get past a certain amount, you're following. It's like you're in a certain very top percent. It was a weird put down, but nonetheless, I enjoyed what you did to him. Was the best thing in media this year. I did
nothing. It was all Ethan Klein of H3H3.
Yeah,
I think he is like he does a show that is about YouTube drama on some level, I think, and I'm not super familiar with the show, but I think he's a genius. Like, I just think he's a genius.
So he said, I'm going to debate. He had a monster following, and Steven Crowder has a huge following. He said, I'm going to debate you, but then he slipped you in instead of him. Crowder
kept challenging him to a debate.
Right.
And apparently Ethan's producer, has watched the Majority Report, is a fan of the show. Yeah. And something they were going back and forth. He said, like, I want to just tell Crowder you should debate Sam Seder. And I was like, oh, that's fun. And that was that. And then one day I got a DM from Ethan, like, Crowder wants to debate me. I'm going to say yes. And then I want to bring you on thing. And I'm like, that is fucking awesome. And we had scheduled it. He said, like, we're doing this on Monday, whatever the date was, at 1 p.m. And so, and I had to fulfill the full hour for the Peacock show, cause like when, it used to be like, okay, I got to do a short day today or whatever, but I had this obligation to bring an hour long, a 55-minute show to the Peacock network and, or the app. And so we started early that day. We started 11:30 so that we could get the full hour in and then go off air. And so we go off, and I'm waiting with Ethan for Crowder to connect at like 1 p.m. And they get an email, and it says, Steven had to go because his wife is pregnant with twins and there was an emergency, but we'll reschedule for next Monday at 12 noon. And I was like, Ethan was like, he saw that you went off air early. And I'm like, what? No, that's not possible. Like, he's not that afraid of, like, debating me. That's absurd. He's like, I'm telling you, I can tell. And I'm like, I can't believe that. And then, but I did think it was weird that, like, I mean, like, if your wife had a pregnancy issue, it's one thing to run out the door and say to the producer, just cancel it, or not, or just assume that they're going to cancel it. But you don't reschedule in that email, right? Like, that was the part that was, I thought, like, it took me a while. Like, wait a second, are you really, we'll do it next week at noon? Like, no, you just say, like, I can't talk now. I'm running out the door. I'll get back to you. And 12 noon is when we start the show. And so what we did on that day, not so much to fool Crowder, but maybe in the back of my mind, but it was like really just sort of like, we'll pre-tape the show. We'll pre-tape the entire show, but play it like it's live. And so we had one computer over there playing the live feed, and then Crowder came on after he saw that I was live. And the worst thing he did was admit when I came on that last week I saw that you went off early on the show. And I'm like, holy shit, you moron. Yeah. Why would you admit that you're so worried about me showing up that you're monitoring my show, but also claiming that nobody knows who I am? And if you think I might show up on the fucking thing, just prepare. Like, what the fuck? It's not like I have superpowers. I'm willing to debate him on whatever he's willing to debate. But he is a coward.
You explained that really well. Everybody should go watch it. Just look up Sam Seder, Klein, Crowder. And then your fans, one of your fans who's like an expert animator, made some brilliant short.
My God.
Which people all I went down that rabbit hole. There's just millions of people that are following this drama. Let me just say this about Seder. I like when you spend time on your show or anywhere criticizing other commentators. I think it's worthless and wasteful for a lot of people to do that. It's just they're just filling time creating content. I actually really like when you and Emma and your team does it, because I think it's super important to understand what you think your analysis of Crowder or Jimmy Dore or Dave Rubin, all these guys are doing. And more importantly, you always say, I am willing to debate any of them. You're basically willing to debate anybody, anytime, and you're probably one of the best debaters out there. People should look up Sam and Charlie Kirk. It's unbelievable. And so I love that you do that. Why do you do that?
I mean, part of it is, we were talking about this actually today in the office. It's like,
Meghan McCain, you guys did that thing on Meghan McCain, and you had a debate with Nomi and Emma and yourself about whether or not you should have been doing it. And I thought Nomi made good points, but I liked what you were doing. Sorry to interrupt you, but
when I was on, we both made the transition from radio, and when you're on radio, and it's a slightly different dynamic from terrestrial and satellite, but it's more similar than it is to do what we do now.
Yeah.
You have a much bigger audience. You have a much bigger potential for an audience. They may not have as deep of a relationship with you, but you have a much bigger audience. And so there's things that you can do in that context that we can't do. We used to be able to raise I don't know. I think you could just amass more. You could help. We could have writers on and get their book to number 3 on Amazon or something. Just in that 3-hour period or something like that. Can't do that in the context of a podcast. But what I happen to work within the YouTube universe, and I just think that this needs to be done in the same way that we're fighting for young people basically who fall down certain trails and this and that. And I think that in this context with the limited amount of stuff that we can sort of impact, I think I'm just situated well to do it. I think the mixture of comedy and my not being terribly concerned about, how people perceive me, it sets me up for this situation well. And so when we go after someone and it's a different, we do it for different reasons with the different people.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have different audiences, and we're trying to basically, just in some instances, we're trying to get people not to be stupid and do stupid things, who may be on the left, and be stupid about their politics. Yeah. And for kids who are following Crowder, let's say, it's just show them that this guy's not, there's a reason why Crowder wears a gun. There's a reason why Crowder, puts pictures of himself lifting weights, because and smoking a cigar and having scotch. Is because he's appealing to 15-year-old boys who have you remember when you were 15, you're looking at magazines with cool cars, and you're the idea of smoking a cigar. It's you're a man, and it means you're gonna hang out with girls, and and we're trying to show to those 15-year-olds, no, he's a douchebag. Like, he's not that. That is not cool. You can do better than this. And with Rubin, it's less. It changed when he stopped pretending he was on the left. He became just more like there was no urgency. And to the extent we do Dave Rubin clips, like we had one today, it's just like laughing. We didn't do it, but just laughing at how stupid he is. But it's not the same, it's not the same project it was when he was pretending he was a left. Like at one point I said, this dude's coming out with a book. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. He's coming out with a book. And I want to make sure that every person who reviews that book, when they search for Dave Rubin, they see me tearing apart his bullshit so that those reviewers know, have a better sense of that there's skepticism about this guy. And he's not the last liberal shit that he was pulling. That was my explicit articulated agenda.
How do you know if you're succeeding at maybe getting some of those people to listen to you or watch you or convert them or get those reviewers to know? How do you know that you're having, a positive? Does it matter?
I mean, occasionally you get an email or you get somebody IMs your calls and this and that, but and it's, you don't know. I mean, I can see how I'm inside their heads. Like I can see that I'm inside of Crowder's head. I can see that I was inside of Rubin's head. And really, I basically just wanted, once he signed with Beck, I was like, mission accomplished. The dude is now just a conservative. He's always been a conservative, but his branding has changed. Yeah. And so, we don't share an audience anymore. And he moves into a different slot. And so I don't know, but do you ever feel like there's you can be sure that you're making it at the very best? One of my favorite bloggers continues to be Atrios. I know you've read him probably through the years at Eschaton. Do you know him?
No.
What? Oh, Duncan Black. He was one of the OG bloggers, and he doesn't write a lot, but he is so smart and so sort of balanced in a world of he's been doing this for 15 years. And I don't mean balanced in terms of both sides. I just mean mentally stable. And he always would talk about at best you're like butterfly wings, right? In terms of impacting something. And you just don't know. So you just do it and assume that you're going to have some, immeasurably small, hopeful, impact.
I think when I listen and watch you guys is I respect your analysis on current events as well as, I always love the guests, but things are happening so fast and it seems like you're somehow able to slow them down and think them through. And I like that, which is why I want to ask you about a few. Can I ask you about a few?
Please, of course.
Tucker Carlson and others touting replacement theory. Says here you're a Jew.
It is. I am. Yeah.
But I wonder if that
replace you.
Yeah, it says that he wants to replace you, and I mean, how do you feel about that? We're here, that he's saying that at 8 p.m. to a massive audience, much less anything about COVID and all the things. It's more urgently deadly, I suppose. But it's a weird place to be. It feels like a weird place to be.
I mean, he in particular, I think, is just incredibly craven. I think that he is looking for an audience and he's filling a gap. He's really the second iteration of Bill O'Reilly in many respects at this point. You remember Bill O'Reilly would get on and go I was really surprised. I went up to Sylvia's up in Harlem and there was no mofo this and mofo that. And, that was his, and that was his iteration of that.
Yeah.
Look, Tucker, I think it's highly unlikely that he just had one white supremacist working on his show. I think that would be surprising that there was only one white supremacist working there. And by white supremacist, I mean a guy who would go on white supremacist bulletin boards and talk about being a white supremacist and how he was going to get stuff on Tucker's show, just to be explicit.
And they fired him. So.
And they ostensibly fired him from Fox.
Right.
I don't know what the guy's doing now for work. A lot of times, I'm sure you've run into this. If you're a very wealthy host of something, sometimes you have your own team of writers that aren't necessarily on the payroll of. I'm not saying that's the situation here. I'm just saying I don't know. But I also find it hard to believe that like there was only one guy, white supremacist. Like everybody else was like going, "Gosh, oh boy, I love working for Tucker, but I do feel a little awkward about that white supremacist guy who's writing all this other material." But that's not me. And live and let live. I find that hard to believe that that's the dynamic there. I think this country's fucked, and I think that like I'm less worried about the racism and the anti-Semitism that's like sort of talked about, but I'm more concerned about the voter disenfranchisement and the sort of like where it's going to lead. Like, I don't think we're going to have a civil war in this country. And I think that like ultimately this stuff is dying out. I mean, I think like what we're seeing is, sort of, white knuckles. I don't think it's ever going to go away, but we're seeing like this country is a sort of ongoing process of like trying to expunge the deep racism that has existed in it and has been part and parcel of it. And I feel like every sort of like cycle gets a little bit less potent, a little bit less.
Mowing the grass.
Huh?
We're mowing the grass. Isn't that the Israeli Arab?
Yeah.
It's almost a similar thing here. I don't know. Maybe it's not fair, but like it gets better, but you got to keep it.
Yes. And I think like, I like to think that it gets, more diminished. Like it used to be that this stuff you didn't even have to articulate this stuff on TV because the practice of society was such that it was like a foregone conclusion. Right. The fact that he has to advocate for this white supremacy doesn't mean that white supremacy doesn't exist in our structures in our society. But like, there's a reason why they, what you see the resurgence of like white supremacy in the 1920s and like, in the early 1900s. And it's because they're rebounding from Reconstruction and they're reasserting white power over, Black people who had the vote and started to build like political power in, you had Black lawmakers in South Carolina and North Carolina, other states, and literally they were massacred or violently taken out. I mean, we had rolling coup after rolling coup during the Reconstruction, and then once they had taken care of those specific political things, there was a reassertion of like the cultural white supremacy. So by the time you get into like the teens in this country, 1900 teens, how would I say that? 1920, leading up to 1920, those years, you have 6 million card-carrying KKK members, of a country of 100 million people. That's a lot. I think we're going through a similar cycle, but it'll be diminished a little bit more. And then who knows, 20, 30 years later, it'll come back even. It's not like it ever goes away, but there has been between Barack Obama and Donald Trump, there was a real reassertion of white supremacy.
Well, see, what about all those historians? I think Jason Stanley wrote a lot about what you were just talking about. But what about all those historians who are currently saying, or even people who lived in places like Rwanda or Serbia, are saying it's Houthis and it's Sunnis and Shias and like I saw this in my country. We saw this happen. All the things that are happening in America, we saw this happen in these other countries. Do not buy those parallels. Are they not fair to make?
Well, the parallels that are not fair to make are that we have the same sort of social structure in which these events are taking place. And we don't. We have a different. We have a different.
So, like, take me for example. Like my next door neighbor, legitimately, I feel like I might have talked to you about this before. Like, legitimately hates me and has a Trump sign and called the town on me. I've never even talked to the woman. Like, I think she's seen me on Twitter or on TV or something. Like, I've never. Like, I talked to her like once, and her son hates me. But so, like, what is that? How does that playing out across this country based on?
I mean, I think this polarization is not going to go away. I don't think it's going to lead to like mass massacres of people. I don't think that's the case. But I think we have serious polarization. And what I think is going to be,
Sam, do you think my neighbor is going to kill me specifically?
I mean, I would take care of the dog. I would be careful of the dog. But I do think what is going to play out here is going to be, and I really don't have a sense of how this is going to go down or go forward, but I think it's very possible within the next 2 to 6 years, we're really going to be living in a country where the majority of people, sheer numbers of people, are going to be really effectively ruled by a minority of the people who are very radically right wing. And so I think we're going to be like, what's this country going to look like where abortion is outlawed in 25 states? What's this country going to look like when you have, I mean, we already have this dynamic, right? 40 million more people voted for the Democrats in the Senate than Republicans. 40 million. And yet we are one person away from the Republicans controlling the Senate. We're going to have that dynamic in the House, I'm pretty sure, after this year. There's a number of state houses around the country, you know, like Wisconsin, you know this.
Yeah.
Democrats win 53% of the vote and have 35% of the representation in the state house. That's nuts. That to me seems unsustainable when it starts like broadening out, or it just becomes like super like ugly. I mean, young people have a very different perspective on this stuff than people in our generation and older. And
where do you learn their perspective?
Well, everybody in my office is under the age of 31, I think.
So that's important.
Yeah, but also, you know, you see it online. I mean, I mean, I spend a lot of time online, and oddly, like my audience is, I think, like something like 70% of my audience is under the age of 45.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, it's nuts. I don't understand it. I honestly don't understand it.
I do,
because I'm old.
No,
I'm old.
Well, all right. So let me ask you about the. I got like 6 minutes left. Does it work?
Sure.
I want to ask you just on that. No, you know, in my community, I'm heavily involved in our school board fight. We're having the whole thing here in Rockland County in Clarkstown, and I went on the mic last week after a woman went up and complained about Joe Biden getting rid of Columbus, and she's Italian. So I went up after her. You can't take the comic out of the local.
I understand.
Community. I tried, couldn't do it, and it didn't help anybody.
Right.
Didn't help me. But I said, first of all, I was like, I'm Italian. I think I said I'm Italian. I said Columbus. She complains that Columbus discovered America and now we're canceling him. I go, Columbus didn't discover America. He discovered Barbados and thought it was India, and then he killed everybody. Just now, moving on to talk about CRT and DEI. But like, it's happening. And you did a great segment, I think yesterday or the day before on your show about this. It's all over the country. How do you see that playing out? What are your concerns about that? And what should we do? We've organized locally to create like a parents that are trying to advocate for, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which when my mom was a teacher in the 80s and 90s, granted, it was a city school in Syracuse, but it wasn't like, that wasn't controversial. It was like mainstreaming kids with learning disabilities and stuff. But anyway, where do you see that all going?
I think people have to engage and run, and not necessarily even run on like, I would just run to take the next step for these people is to run their own candidates and to get control of these school boards. And that's going to suck. That's going to suck in a way that like we can't even sort of like contemplate, because the CRT is just simply another way of saying like, we need more God. We need more, we need less of the mathy, sciencey stuff and more about like teaching people that Columbus actually did discover America, and the Indians were very happy to see him, and they brought him corn and maize and, like
George Washington.
It's just, I mean, it's like Texas. Like the whole country is becoming like Texas. I mean, this is the thing. Like, this, right? Like back in the day, we would talk about this Texas lawmaker who's introducing this crazy ass like legislation and blah, blah, blah. And then I had to get some people going like, why are you focusing on that one outlier in Texas? Oh, it's 10 years later and that person is the senator of Texas. Like there was a time where like Toomey in Pennsylvania was considered the complete freakazoid end of the Republican Party. And now this guy's like firmly in the center of the Republican Party. Right? I mean, these people are lunatics, and they're going to take control of our government and, local school boards. I mean, I all I can tell is like people to get involved and like know who you're voting for too. I think people just need to. So few people vote in these elections that when you have a very vocal, motivated minority of those people who are like, the vaccines are putting 3G in our bodies, like they're going to go out and vote because they don't want that 3G in their bodies, or they don't want their arms to be magnetized. And how do you get that level of commitment from people who are just like, oh yeah, no, I just want the schools to be normal.
Yeah.
And good. Like the way that they're supposed to be. And it's really hard for me to imagine that somebody who believes that, a paperclip can stick to their arm because they got a vaccine is going to be school board, president. And until that person ends up being the school board president. And so people have to engage, but I don't know how much they are.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Last thing I'm going to ask you, I love your analysis on politics. You, I think, have a pretty good record at predicting kind of what's happening and the motives. Can you just give me your thoughts, as long as you have left, on Manchin and Sinema and what they're doing? Because they're doing different things, but just the one thing I hear a lot from so many smart people that I interview, and I'm getting frustrated with it, is that Democrats have to work harder and Joe Biden has to work harder, and Democrats have to do much, and it's like I don't know what they can do. They go back and they talk about Lyndon Johnson and what he did to twist arms and this and that, and I feel like that historical is asymmetrical, the comparison, and so what do you think Democrats could or should be doing to change Joe Manchin?
I think there's not a lot that can be done right now, to be honest with you. I think that the huge mistake was made in the weeks after the COVID relief bill passed. And I was saying so at the time. You turn around, you do it then. As soon as Joe Biden opened it up to Republican lawmakers, remember they came in and it failed, but it ate up 2 or 3 weeks. And that's when Portman and Sinema came. It's like, this is the analogy I used on the show today. You don't have as strong a team as them. Okay. You don't. The Democrats don't have as strong a team because there's not the same cohesion. Your one chance is hurry up offense so that the other team has not gotten into position. Like if you get one player on the sideline or they're running around like, wait, am I supposed to be covering the wide receiver, or am I getting the guy coming? Whatever it is, I don't know football well enough to do this, but people get the idea. Time benefited Like, remember what the Republicans were talking about when the COVID relief bill passed? $1.5 trillion, right? The biggest spending bill that you and I had ever seen. The child tax credit, $300, the extension on the unemployment benefits. I mean, on and on. Checks for $1,400 on top of the $600, whatever it was. It should have been $2,000, but the checks were $1,400. But the amount of money that they actually put out was larger than the earlier COVID relief because they were including more people into it, dependent children of adults, et cetera, et cetera. There was more people put into it. Do you remember what the Republicans were talking about? Fucking Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss. They were talking about Dr. Seuss. And it's like the Republicans hadn't gotten their shit together at that point. And we've seen leaks of what Manchin's been doing since then. Getting, note labels billionaires to give good jobs to people, like spreading the money around. No, you do not give them time to align. They kept saying we learned the lesson from the Obama administration. They didn't. They didn't learn the lesson. They thought they did, and they thought they were being clever. But the lesson from the Obama administration is you do it. You line up and you do it. You throw the ball, you run the ball, whatever it is, whatever metaphor you want. You do it you strike while the iron's hot. Yeah. And instead they delayed, and they thought they were being crafty, and they thought they were massaging this. No, do it before Joe Manchin signs a contract with Chuck Schumer for $1.5 trillion. Do it. Rush it through. Do three big programs big. Just get it done. And they blew it. The only thing that they could do now, and obviously it's not happening, but if I was Joe Biden, I would be on the phone to my Department of Justice, and I'd be like, we need to do a fucking investigation into what happened at the University of West Virginia and with Joe Manchin's daughter and about the EpiPens and all that stuff. Start that investigation. Let's do this.
Biden can't call the Department of Justice and at all. He can't even call. He can't even pick up the phone and call him. Right.
Well, I don't know. Klain. I don't know. Somebody does. Get an investigation for me to quash. That's what I would do if I was Joe Biden. I want an investigation. I want to quash it, and that's it. With Sinema, I don't know what you do. I mean, she doesn't seem to have any incentives. She doesn't seem to have like a rational incentive structure. I don't know what you do, but I don't know that she wants to be out there alone. So, but I think it's too late. I think I think Schumer and Biden in particular. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Pelosi, but the bill passed there. They got the bill.
Yep.
And there's certainly things that she was blocking. There's certainly things I'm sure she was happy were blocked. But I don't buy into the idea that, Democrats are controlled opposition. Like Joe Biden doesn't want to lose this fight. Joe Biden doesn't want a $1.5 trillion bill after he said it should be a $3.5 trillion. If he had come out and said $1.5 trillion, we would all have been like, wish it was Bernie, but okay, $1.5 trillion. But now he's going to look like a loser. And no president wants that. And I think it's just sheer effing incompetence by Chuck Schumer and by Joe Biden. Schumer is a concierge. He doesn't, that's all his job is. He perceives himself as a concierge, period. End of story.
Really?
Yep.
That's how he perceives himself.
Huh. I think so. Yep.
Sam Seder, I appreciate you talking to me a lot. I love talking to you, and I'm a big fan of the show and what you guys are doing. I think it's your best work ever, and we need it. We really do. I mean, people really need to have, places to go to try to understand what's going on, and you're certainly one of the best. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pete. I appreciate it. We're going to have you on Friday one of these days. I keep saying that. That's when we have
well, it would be like one of those. If you have me on, it'll be like one of those, like a super fan on Howard. I just keep talking about like inside shit that I watch happen on the show and why it seems like the smartest person on the show. We don't get to see that person's face sometimes. Who's that guy that's always your producer?
Matt. Yeah, he's super smart.
When you're not there, he talks a lot with Emma, and he makes great, like he's great at explaining shit very quickly. I like Matt.
Really smart. Really smart.
Yep. All right, bud. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.